people pleasers and personality patterns. And what I'm going to speak to in this video is the 5 people pleasing patterns. And what's really important here is that this isn't my work. This has come from Stephen Kessler and John Parakos, Alexander Lowen, and the foundational work done by Wilhelm Reich. And if you're familiar with Wilhelm Reich and his work on characterology and the body, then you'll know what I'm talking about. And I'll give you a brief history on Wilhelm. And if you don't want to know about it, then skip ahead. But Wilhelm discovered that in his clinical practice, he was a psychoanalyst and worked with Freud and Jung. And he was a psychoanalyst, and he could see that in his clinical practice, people would exhibit armoring on their body. Like they would move a certain way, they would speak a certain way, their body would be in specific patterns and shapes that would indicate specific childhood trauma. Just let that land for you for a second, yeah? Is that your body can show you where you have the defenses and the armoring around your trauma. For example, like Wilhelm Reich, when he was working on a particular psychiatric patient who had schizophrenia, he would massage the base of his neck and the occipital. There's the base of the neck where the skull meets the skull meets the base of the top of the spine here, and he was able to reduce the symptom picture of schizophrenia. And schizophrenia, and I'll talk about that in one of the patterns here, is it's related to the schizoid type or the leaving pattern. And what I'm going to do while I'm speaking to this is I'm going to make reference to this book. It's called the 5 Personality Patterns, and it's done by Stephen Kessler. And Stephen has done an amazing job at synthesizing complex psychiatric and psychoanalytical terms into something that's user friendly, so the average Joe blogs on the street can pick up this book and identify what personality pattern that they have, and they can see how it plays out in their life, and also basic techniques to move out of it. I mean, some of these therapies in this book do require a witness or a specialist or a consultant like myself to guide you through, because we can see the blocks as they appear in your body and tend to them with loving care and the guidance that's required in order to hold your body and hold the parts of you that has been invalidated as a child, which builds the armoring, which creates the neurosis and all that mental illness that you might be taking medication for. Or you might be convinced that you're not allowed to change this diagnosis because someone in a white lab coat has told you you're not allowed to change this diagnosis, right? So a lot of mental illnesses are they're incurable. You have them for life, right? And Wilhelm Reich, Alexander Lowen, John Parakos, and Stephen Kessler, particularly Wilhelm Reich and Alexander Lowen, believe that these diagnoses were false, right? So in this, what I'm going to do straight up is take you into some of the patterns. So let's get into it. Now, the first one I'm going to speak to is it's known as the endurer pattern. And how the endurer pattern shows itself, like it pleases through compliance. And these people really struggle with being able to say no. So if you're someone who struggles to say no, or you say yes to things when you actually mean no, or no to things when you actually mean yes, this is most likely your pattern. And this pattern can be invoked because you don't really know who you are at the core. And all of these patterns have that theme. This is a self-worth issue. So if you also have overlapping self-worth issues, like you have low self-worth, low self-esteem, you feel beaten down by the world or beaten down by partners or your boss, then this is the kind of injury that would show up in your life, right? And this type in particular, the endurer pattern, can really struggle with mainstream psychotherapy because they don't like being told what to do. And then they lack the motivation or the momentum in order to keep on keeping up with particular practices, which can help them escape the patterns in their life that are self-sabotaging and people-pleasing. So the endurer person will sacrifice themselves unconsciously just to fulfill somebody else's need. And what's at the base of this is anger. So the endurer pattern, also known as the Masochist, and there's a whole bunch of other names for them, like the Humanitarian. They will sacrifice themselves because they don't want to feel their anger. Like no comes from an anger. It's like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that. And yes can also come from a style of anger that's mixed with your libido, right? When you have a full body yes, you can feel that. No, I want to go do that. I want to go do that thing. Like, yeah, sure, I want to come out with you. No, I don't want to come out with you. And this can show up a lot in holiday periods, right? So this injury shows up a lot around obligation, around family time, right? Come to dinner. It's Christmas. It's Thanksgiving. You have to be around the family. You got to be around the family, right? No, I don't want to be around the family. Or yes, I do want to be around the family. Then you go there because you've done it out of obligation or you compromised, and it's just a resentful session. You just feel resentful the whole time, this simmering resentment because your family picks on you. They don't like how you dress. They don't like that you haven't got a partner. They don't like how much turkey that you're eating or something, right? So the endurer individual will struggle to move out of these momentum patterns because their body is so anchored into where they're at. What do I mean by that? The book talks about this really well. So I've mentioned the book at the start. I'm going to mention it again. The 5 personality patterns. So the endurer type is, the way Stephen Kessler describes it, is like a mountain. And they're really anchored in the dirt, in the ground. They've got roots that go all the way down into the soil. So when you try and budge them, they don't want to go. An endurer needs to be encouraged to want to move. And so throughout their childhood, the typical injury that plays out here is their parents oppress them. They tell them that you're not allowed to do a thing. You want to, as a child, you want to fulfill your will. You want to go play with a toy. You want to go eat a thing. You want to go to the toilet when you want to go to the toilet. You might be able to hear my son in the background. He's 1 this year. So you might want to go to the toilet, and then your parent tells you no, or they rebuke you for it, or you don't want to do something and your parents force you to do something. So what happens here is your bodily autonomy, your sense of willpower, and your own being able to enact your own will is corrupted. It's corrupted. And can you imagine what that does to a child? Then can you imagine what that does to a teenager, having your will corrupted, like you're not allowed to do a thing? And how that plays out in adulthood, right? So this is a dream squasher. This is a self-worth squasher. This is I have all these dreams and I can't do it. And you might find a lot of these people in personal development, right? They think that they see all these other people achieving all these amazing things, but their body will keep them stuck. They might be able to achieve a little bit, but it drags them all the way back again because there's a fundamental childhood issue that needs to be tended to. And yeah, like it says down the bottom here is they want to keep other people happy, and they're actually driven by a fear of abandonment because when they've expressed their authentic self, they were abandoned, they were invalidated. So invalidation is a huge theme in all of these 5 types that I'm going to speak to. Okay, great. The next type is the oral or the merging pattern. And what shows up here for the oral person is they can overgive and they seek validation through overgiving. And in this they get exhausted from overgiving, and it can be this unconscious thing. These are people that end up in like hospitals and in the healing arena, and they're also classic overtalkers. So if you're having a conversation with one, they'll get stuck in story. The last 3 minutes of what they have to say is usually the most important thing. So orals, when you're having a conversation with one and you tell them that you need to go and stick to that, because some people want to be polite and that's the rigid just wants to be polite, the oral will get to their point. But in the context of people pleasing is that they over offer support to manipulate you in the hopes that you're going to give them support later. And they can get so resentful when you ask them for something because in their minds, they've been giving you support all along, but you've not asked for it, right? They might give you tips on books to read. They might give you like drop food off at your house. They might give you all these pointers on, what's the next best podcast you should listen to, or the next book that you should read, or what Jordan Peterson or Andrew Tate says. They feel like all this information is really valuable to you, but you might not have great, tell me, thank you for telling me. But that you just don't receive it because you have no need for it, right? So the oral injury also occurs in childhood as well, where the mum just can't connect to the child. It can also be pre-audible, but mostly it's before puberty, right? Where like the mum just can't give you the resources that you want. It can be either caregiver, but it's mostly the mum. Most neuroticism comes from the mother, and not many people want to hear that, but it's true. So, sidebar, when women can choose partners that are correct and when men can support their partners, you'll see a revolution in the next generation of kids that come through. Because that pre-audible period, the in utero period, the child has already been conditioned by the mother's psyche. Right. If you want to learn more about that, it's in another book called The Dragon Mother by Michael Tsarian. Go check out his work. It's freaking phenomenal, right? It'll blow your mind on everything that you've been told about what the world is all about and how psychology you can stay in the trap of always working on yourself, right? Okay, back to the oral or the merging pattern. So like the name says, it's a merging thing. It's a merging pattern. So the person energetically wants to just be in you. They get sustenance from like really being in your energy, like really being up and close, really just into you, right? And you might feel this invasion coming into you. And if you're someone who has a high self-worth, then you'll be able to say no or push them away or be so self-sourced that when they get angry at you for people pleasing, then you can say, hey, I didn't ask for that. Like, thank you, but I didn't ask for that. Right? I've experienced this before with clients after I help a client and they want to give me a whole bunch of tips on things, but how I can improve my business. I get this from friends who I just offer an ear to, and they want to take me on bushwalks or they want to give me, again, more business tips. Like, I didn't ask for those things, right? But they want to give back to you, but it's not honest. It's people pleasing. Anything that comes from people pleasing is inauthentic and continuously leads to a life of self-betrayal. Yeah? Cool. All right. The psychopath, the aggressive pattern. All right. So when I say psychopath, don't get your knickers in a twist, or do get your knickers in a twist. You behave how you want to behave. These terms, if you can listen to a term like a psychopath or a narcissist or a sociopath and be called those things and just like water off a duck's back and they don't impact you, then you've reached peak. You can receive them, and you're not in. This is the difference between indifference and receiving things. Someone can tell you that you're a psychopath, and you can yeah, I am. Yeah, and I have sociopathic traits as well, and I have all the things in the DSM-5. If you want to throw the whole book at me, if you can own all of those things, because all of us have all of those at some level on the spectrum, then you've really reached a state of high self-worth and self-efficacy where you're on the edge of mastering life, right? Because your self-worth is immutable, and that's more of those people that we want on the planet, right? Because they're the ones that aren't swayed by authoritarian regimes or someone telling you what to do because you just know what your no is. And I'm not doing that. Or, yeah, I'm going to do that, right? So there's a imbued sense of self-worth that makes you very powerful and efficient in the world. So the psychopath aggressive pattern, what's here, they're people-pleasing, and you might not think much of it. It's really charm and manipulation, like it says down the bottom there. Using charm and manipulation, they please by fulfilling others' needs. Their aim is control, not genuine care or concern for others. And I've used this behavior, I have this pattern. I've got all five. If you're born with all five, or you're nurtured with all five, and then as you age, two emerge as the most common ones that you use as patterns to armor yourself from the reality of life, and also use to move through life. So the aggressive pattern is one that's also known as the leader. When you transmute the gifts, when you transmute the shadow type behavior into the gifts, and the shadow being in the body, like the body holds the pattern. So you might have tried thinking your way out of this and you cannot. It's because it's in the armoring in the body, which requires body work, deep body work, or working with someone who understands body psychotherapy like myself, to take you into that armoring, to release the shadow, or integrate the shadow so they become gifts, right? And most people that are watching this, I'm assuming that you're into a bit of personal development and you want to be the best human that you can be, right? You have a time limit on this planet and you want to be the best one, right? So in this, with the aggressive pattern, the charm, right? And in relationships and in corporate and in marketing and in the way you see a lot of success in the world, this is the psychopath, the aggressive pattern playing out, right? Where someone can smooth talk you into starting a relationship, ending a relationship, buying some investment property that you don't want to buy, sinking a whole bunch of money on some crypto scam. I'm not saying that crypto is a scam. What I am saying is that there's lots of crypto scams out there, and finding the correct person is part of this incubation of what it means to be a human. So if your instincts are injured, this is a sidebar. If your instinct is injured, then you'll be fooled by a lot of people. And low self-worth is part of that instinct injury because you're not connected to your core self. The core self knows, will listen to the red flags and act on the red flags and even orange flags. So back to the psychopath piece. Like you might find a lot of psychopaths in institutions where authority is granted, right? So the military, the police force, doctors, schools, anywhere where you get you do a test and get a badge of authority, right? And in this, how charm is played out is they know energetically what you want and what you need. So they will say things in order to falsely reassure you, to neutralize whatever your red and orange flags are. So you do the thing that they want you to do, right? And this can be really confusing for someone who does have low self-worth because they think, oh, this person's trustworthy. I can trust this person. Look, they're reading what I need. Like they must have my best interest at heart. No. But in this, the context of people pleasing here is that the psychopaths just can't ask for what they want. It's like, cool, hey, I'd love for you to work with me. So instead of going through this whole marketing shit, like, you want to work with me? Or, look, I'm running low on money right now and I'd love for you to buy this car from me. Or, hey, all my commissions are based on you buying this car. Or, I actually don't want to start a relationship with you. I just really want to have sex with you. So if you're open to that, then great. Otherwise, cool, let's just check this out. Like, let's call this for what it is, right? So the psychopath has its way to charm people. And in that, the fear of the rejection in themselves, as the injury comes from rejection, being rejected by a parent, usually the opposite sex parent. Now, I'll jump across to the book here. Stephen doesn't go into a lot of the deeper sexuality components because that's an advanced thing. What's played out between your parent and caregiver dynamics. So he, again, like I mentioned before, he's made this to be an entry-level tool, an entry-level book into inner work and understanding what your armoring is to stop you from living the life that you want. So with the psychopath, and I did a podcast about Trump because Trump fits this. A few other people fit this, but Trump in particular, like the betrayal between both parents, like being like rummaged between mum and dad and having mum played off by dad and all this kind of stuff plays out. It creates like a bipolar split in the psyche. So you're not quite sure who you can trust. So you end up trusting no one. You just learn to manipulate one parent off the other, or you learn to manipulate one parent because you know what they really want. And then that serves as a purpose to get your wants and your needs met. But in that is a self-betrayal. In that self-betrayal, you create low self-worth, which you're forever trying to compensate by charming people to get what you want. So it impacts your relationships. It impacts your image into the world, because some people can feel that. They can feel that they're being manipulated, and they don't trust you, right? So you have like half of the world will be like, yeah, let's do this thing. Look at him, he's a leader. And the other half's like, I don't trust this guy. There's something off with him, right? Which is interesting, right? You may have seen that play out with his last term. Next pattern is the schizoid leaving pattern. See Daisy? Let's put that back there. Now, the leaving pattern, like it mentions there, I'm just going to read it out. So it triggers me to start speaking to it. Preferring invisibility, they please by withdrawal, avoiding conflict and attention. They stay in the background to avoid disappointment. So the schizoid and the leaving pattern is terrified of confrontation. Similar to the merging pattern, the enduring pattern. But really the leaving pattern can be overrun. So energetically, these people aren't really in their bodies. And these are the ones that love doing astral travel and getting all caught up in like Alan Watts and spiritual BS that doesn't keep them grounded. I say it's BS because if you're a leaving pattern person, you're the most easiest to be manipulated because you don't want to be here, which makes it very easy to sow all kinds of seeds of doubt and end of the world drama, and people are coming to control me and all that kind of stuff, right? The truth is, the leaving pattern can really be a truther gateway where you just go down all these rabbit holes and get stuck in your head and just terrified of life. So for the leaving pattern, there's a terror is a theme. And in that, any confrontation, anybody who has a more embodied self or the aggressive pattern, they won't push their needs. So in a business sense, if you have a psychopath or an aggressive pattern as a boss, the leaving pattern person won't confront you, right? You might ask them for feedback. Hey, they might be a really intelligent person. The leaving pattern person, they're really quite intelligent, genius level intelligence, and a lot of them work in IT. But they won't challenge your boss. They won't challenge or give feedback. You know, you almost like got to invite them, pull all of your energy back out of the room and allow them to speak. So in this, there can be this real people pleasing because they're not connected to their core. They won't say what their wants and their needs are because they're not in their body. They can't interrogate their body to find out what it is that they want and their need. Because in order to know that, you've got to be in the body, and the body knows what you need. Otherwise, their defense is to disappear into the astral, hoping for some aliens to come and abduct them, or disappear in some astral travel somewhere, or lucid dreaming, right? But the reality is here, now, flesh and blood, right? It's where your consciousness is here, right? In a dreaming world, it's a different type of consciousness, right? But if you want to act your will into the waking world, the leaving pattern person needs to become embodied to themselves and connect to their core. And the book has some great tips on how to do that, right? So if you're someone who sounds like this is you, then either jump into my private Facebook group or subscribe to me and get yourself this book, an amazing book. There's also on Audible as well. So, like it says, their disappointment can really be a pain point for the leaving pattern person, because they've just been met with disappointment all their life. Every single time they've gone to express their needs or their wants, very quiet voice, and they might shout it, but there's no charge behind it, right? I told you what I wanted and what I needed, and you weren't even in your body. It's like a whisper, right? So these people can get stuck in a loop of learning the right communication, like nonviolent communication, how to speak to attachment types. It doesn't work. These are The leaving pattern person has the second worst boundaries. Well, I think the merging pattern's kind of the both. The merging wants to get in there. The leaving pattern wants to run away, right? So the leaving pattern person can be mistaken for anxious attachment type, but it's so much deeper than that. So much deeper than that. Yes, if you're listening and you hear yourself that you're an anxious attachment type, this leaving pattern person, this leaving thing, that can also be a theme, right? And all of these 5 patterns can show up in different areas of your life. For example, you might be a merging type person when it comes to family. You might be an aggressive type person when it comes to your workplace. You might be a leaving pattern person in relationships. You might be an endurer pattern person when you're eating food. Or you could be a rigid in how you drive your car. So all of these defenses can come up, which is why when you have someone witnessing you or consulting with you, like what I do, is I can see the defense as it plays out in areas of your life that want attention, whether it's finance, relationships, business, relationships with family, intimate others, spiritual practice, all those things that appear on the wheel of life. If you don't know what the wheel of life is, I'll make another video about the wheel of life. I'm going to do one in my private Facebook group. So if you're keen to get in there, get some more of these juicy nuggets as they happen, then jump in there. Now, the last pattern I'll speak to is the rigid and achiever pattern. And this is the most painful of all the patterns to attend to, because the grief, and you might be feeling it now, the grief that rigids hold is deep, and it can be overwhelming, because the rigids achieve through perfection. So they seek approval. Let's read out the bottom here. Continue to read out the bottom. Their rigid adherence to rules and expectations sometimes compromises authenticity. It most certainly compromises authenticity. And what Stephen mentions in the book here, and it's a great one-liner, is the rigid, they're saying to identify the defense, is let this land on you, is I am my performance. So the rigid is great at performing. They learn how to be a good boy or a good girl. They get rewarded for doing good things. Oh, you're such a good runner. Great. So I have this performance of being a runner becomes your identity. So when you don't run very well, you degrade your self-worth, right? And the inner critic here is horrible. The inner critic that comes in, it's my son hitting a pan out there. The inner critic is horrible. Like it will interrogate you in your sleep. It will haunt you that you're not being perfect. You're not doing something that's right. And in this haunting of this inner critic, it's so reactive. Like you just see things that are wrong, and like, oh, so there's an advantage here. Is in this perfection, they're great in business. They're great in being a cog in a machine, cog in the matrix, a cog in the machine, because they see a rule, they want to enforce it, and then anybody else that steps out of line is like, why aren't you doing the rule? And we saw this over the past couple of years. Right? This rigid injury comes out, right? Because you're unconscious to it. Just be obedient. Be a good citizen, right? Do the right thing. And people don't understand that you can do whatever you want. So someone who has this injury is so obedient to authority that they are just a cog in the machine. But underneath all of this people-pleasing component here is they have no connection to their core self. And this is the grief piece that I spoke about just before. Is that to discover who they really are, they need to grieve and feel all those moments of self-betrayal. And this ties into relationships as well, where they've got into relationships when they knew all the red flags and they made a logical decision to get into the relationship, and now the relationship's like it's not correct. So they need to grieve all of that. And rigids also have a tendency to have backdoor plans to things because their inner critic creates it for them. Oh, you know what? Here's an example. You know what? She doesn't like my family, so that can be something that I can harp on about to eventually get out of the relationship. Or, he's a rotten drinker. I know it, and it was a red flag when we first started, but you know what? I'm going to stay in this relationship because that's my back door. That's my way out. In 5 years' time, 3 years' time, I'm just going to use that as leverage to get out. Instead of just getting out or having the conversation, do you want to change that? I don't want to be around a drinker. I don't want to be around someone who smokes. I don't want to be around someone who can't be loyal to me. I don't want to be around someone who can't sort out their finances or can't provide for me, right? So the rigid has a real issue with expressing their wants and the needs, also because they're afraid of rejection. This is a rejection injury too, where they were rejected for who they really were at the core. They weren't actually nurtured for who they really were at the core. They get all of these impressions from their caregivers that, oh, that's a good thing to do. Look how you built that Lego model. Wow, you're so good. Look how you solved that problem, that maths paper. Wow, you're so smart. What the caregivers miss is the space in between those achievements where the child actually is. And in that, they create the rigid defense, the achiever pattern, where it's just back-to-back achievement. In fact, you can't even enjoy an achievement because you're already moving on to the next one. So how they people please is they're always looking outside for validation. Look at my certificate. Look at my relationship. Look at all my followers. Look at the money I made this week. And they have a type. They're very beautiful. I have this defense. They have their appearance. A lot of their energy is on the outside of their body. That's not in the core. So they're a very attractive outwardly. Very outwardly appearance of attractive. They've got like the jaws, shoulders, like just good ratios, right? Correct ratios. But inside they're disconnected from their core, which impacts their relationships and their sexuality, how they express their sexuality. So they can be amazing performers in bed, especially in that first interim period where the ego or your boundaries dissolve in that honeymoon period. But after that 9-month period, all the boundaries come back. You default back to your original self, your somatic self, your true blueprint. And then to work on that blueprint requires body psychotherapy or core energetics work, particular, or bioenergetics work, where you're working with the body's biofields and the armoring in the body. So rigids particularly have a lot of tight necks, shoulders. What else is there? Chest, jaw, right? So if you have all these somatic symptoms of something that's what's going on in my body, or if you avoid massage, if you don't like being touched, there's a bit of rigid, can be a bit of endure in there too. Like if you're ticklish, you don't like being tickled. Underneath tickling, there can be rage and then grief. So this is where the body psychotherapy piece comes in. And like most mainstream therapy doesn't get this because that was part of the original plan. The body has nothing to do with it. We're just a mind. Everything's in the mind. The body is in the mind. The mind's actually in the body. The mind is in the body, the whole body. To the clients that I work with, when I see their defenses, I say, what are you feeling right there? I can see when they disassociate. I can see when they go into fantasy. I can see when they're uncomfortable. I can see when their eyes twitch, right? All of these things hide the truth of what's going on for you. They hide they hide the people-pleasing part of you. Right? They actually expose it for me. I say, what are you feeling right there? So, John, I hate you right now. It's like, yeah, good. Tell me more about that. Like, what's the hate for? John, you keep on seeing me. This is hard work. Yeah, it is hard work, right? Being reborn. This is the proper being reborn. That's a baptismal thing. It's like actually being reborn is hard work. And it's beautiful work on the other side because your relationships change. You no longer people please. You become authentic. Your voice carries the charge of your entire soul, your being, your spirit. Like you might be able to hear in me right now, right? It's something that cannot be faked. So if you want to stop people pleasing, and if you don't want to work with me, I recommend getting the book. Start with the book. It's a bit of light reading. It's a super quick book. It's great. It's broken into chapters. It's got photos on certain things. The website's great as well. There's a test on his website to work out what type you are. And that's an initial stage into understanding what could be going on for you. Because once you start doing deep inner work on all of these, the discernment between all the patterns gets very thin. The veil gets very thin. When you first start this work, it's really obvious. But the deeper you go, the more fluid your transition between the 5 types are, and then it requires someone to interrogate you to find them. Otherwise, the other defenses will hide from you. Like if you're a rigid person and you think you can work it out on your own, great, give it a go. But there'll be a point where the rigid will take over and I'll just be trying to make you perfect. And it just becomes another performance. So I'm performing how I want to perform. I'm performing because I'm no longer a rigid. Yay! Now you just become something else, right? So the rigid is armored in their core. There's actually like a column around their spine where their core is armored. So there's a false self between the core and the real world. And that false self is all about achievement. So if you heard yourself in this, like I mentioned before, and you want to go deeper, get the book. If you want to go even deeper still, get in my group. And if you want to go even deeper than that, let's have a conversation about sorting out your life and stopping you from people pleasing. Because if you're a people pleaser, it's a half-life, right? Low self-worth, keep on giving yourself away to people, like end up depressed, right? And that's not a life to live, right? Easily, so super obedient. You know, you just keep manipulating people. And if you can't manipulate people, you can't trust them, right? Because you're afraid they're going to manipulate you, right? The aggressive pattern. So that's all I got for you. Mad love. Check out my other videos. Subscribe if you like this one. Like it. If you want to share it, share it. If you feel someone in your life could really benefit from listening to this, then please send it to them. You will transform them and their family of origin and their friends and their relationships. This is the cusp of a new era, and I'd love to see where it goes. All right. Bye.